Welcome back, everybody, to another video. Today we are going to be reviewing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This was one that's actually been my most anticipated movie of the year, and it absolutely lived up to my expectations, even surpassed them. And I do want to say, right before we dive into the meat of this video, that if you are looking for a non-spoiler review and a spoiler review, you can get both in this video. They'll be labeled down below as such, so if you only want to see the no spoiler review, then check that part out, and vice versa. But before we even dive into the actual video, I did want to show you, so if you go to AMC theaters, and no, this is not an ad for them, if you go to AMC theaters and see this movie, you'll actually end up getting this really cool Guardians of the Galaxy popcorn tin, and it's just like that. And you might be wondering, well, why are there holes in it? Well, it actually comes with a, it's like, I don't know how big it is, but it's bigger than, just here, I'll kind of give you a reference. Here's like a Funko Pop. So, it's bigger than my face. So, it's pretty big, and it's, of course, Rocket Raccoon, who this movie is mainly about. So, really, it looks really nice. So, yeah, guys, if you are new here, consider hitting that subscribe button, letting me know that you guys like the content that we put out here. And without further ado, let's dive into the movie review. Okay, this is the non-spoiler part of my review. So the biggest thing that this movie did for me is it felt like, even in Guardians 2, it just felt like we never, we did get enough of the characters, but we never really sunk our teeth into them as much as like Iron Man or those other characters. And they always just felt like they were throwing jokes around. Especially the one character I really want to talk about here is Drax. Because Drax has always been used as this very comedic character who, yes, lost, and he has the backstory of him losing his family. But outside of that, he's never really had a huge role in the Guardians movies in terms of plot and where he fits in with that. Well, that changes a lot in this movie, and he very much has a very good role in this movie. The plot itself is very well laid out, and one of my favorite things about the plot in this movie is that it lays itself out in a way that makes it so that the ending is incredibly rich. I think that the last hour of this movie, I was just a pure smile was across my face, and I could not stop smiling. And there were times when I was ready to stand up and cheer for moments, and I had to, contain myself because I was in a theater with, a lot of other people. I don't want to dive too much into this because this was more for my spoiler review, but Rocket's backstory in this movie is very well done. And the one thing I will say about it is that it's the most I've ever been sad or seen something so cruel and upsetting in an MCU movie. It is by far the most drastic, sad, cruel, the way he was treated, just I was just about to cry. I was so upset. And just seeing how he endures that pain, even through Guardians 1 and Guardians 2, and barely even talking about it, just props to Rocket for, being that person, or Raccoon, I should say. Let's talk about the villain quick. So the High Evolutionary is a fantastic villain. However, you will absolutely hate his guts by the end of the movie. The way that he treats Rocket is just, you're gonna hate him. You're gonna want to rip him to shreds. You're gonna want to stomp on his face. But the actor who plays him is fantastic, and he gets it done, and he gets it done well. You could tell he had fun with the role of just being this guy that everyone hates. So that's what I'll say about the High Evolutionary. The music choice is really good. I did not expect the music to go as hard as it did in this movie. And especially, I can't really talk about it because it's a spoiler, but there was this, in the final act, there was this point where they started playing a really good song, and it just for some reason hit really well, and the mood was perfect for it. Yeah, I thought all the music though was fantastic, and exactly like where it was placed in the story was all great. For me, the biggest thing that this movie did is it just felt like it ended where every character needed to be at the end of this journey. Every character ends up at a point where it's like, hey, you know what? I think I'm okay with that. And I'm glad that this is where that character ended up at the end of this movie. That was at least my thoughts towards it. I was like looking at each part of the Guardian, I'm like, okay, this character ended up here, this character ended up here. Oh, okay. It ends up being very well done with a very like well-written conclusion is what I'm basically trying to say. The last thing I do want to say is I want to talk about Adam Warlock for a second, because he's obviously the new character in this movie, and he does a really good job. I know a lot of people weren't a big fan of what like his role in this movie. I think they're being a little too harsh, and I think people need to remember that he's also the new character, and that he, you know, he had a kind of a like a villain to hero arc in this movie, and that, you know, who he is now, he's going to continue growing. James Gunn and I think even Kevin Feige said that he's going to continue to be in more Marvel films and yada yada yada. So he's going to be fine. This is now the beginning of my spoiler review. Let's talk about the good. So one of my favorite things, again, that I was already talking about in my non-spoiler part of this review, was just the character growth. I'm going to start off with each character and just talk a little bit about each one. KRAGLIN in this movie, obviously he's like learning to like cope with the fact that like Yondu isn't here anymore, and learning using his arrow, and he actually has a really great character moment when the High Evolutionary is like infiltrating nowhere, and he like uses the arrow and he does all this stuff, and it's actually pretty cool. There was this moment in the beginning of the movie that I found pretty funny, because he tried to use the arrow on Adam Warlock, and obviously Adam Warlock is part of the Sovereign, and he's made out of, I guess it's like pure gold, or it's basically something that the arrow can't penetrate. And he tries to use it on him, and he just hits him, and it like falls down. And I thought that was a pretty funny bit that they did. But overall, KRAGLIN has a really cool, just, I don't know, he fits in there, but he's not the focus of this movie, and it does show. I'll talk about COSMO quick, because COSMO actually is like one of our new characters that actually just get a pretty decent amount of screen time. There's this joke throughout the whole movie when KRAGLIN calls Cosmo a bad dog, and that's kind of like most of their lines is like them like having comedic moments where Cosmo doesn't want to be called a bad dog. But she does actually help the Guardians when they're trying to save all the children off of the High Evolutionary ship, and she like holds together, like she has like mind, like telekinesis. So I thought that part was pretty neat as well. Let's talk about Adam Warlock quick, because he has a great character arc in this movie. So his mom, who was like the leader of the Sovereign, she like basically, she is in this movie, and we find out that like she was like that the Sovereign and that a lot of other races in the galaxy were made by the High Evolutionary, and she kind of like is like his puppet, and she does exactly what he wants, or else she's going to die. And she kind of sends Adam Warlock on these missions because he's just very capable. He has the power behind him. He doesn't really have the brains, because you find out that he's like kind of dumb, but I'm sure that'll kind of change in time, because he's always grown up around these like really self-centered, you know, people, the Sovereign. But throughout the movie, Adam Warlock, he starts to see like, you know, what, because his mom was serving the High Evolutionary, and he sees that, you know, what he's doing is not good, you know, doing these things to animals, to innocent people, and then, you know, the High Evolutionary just kills a whole entire civilization in this movie, and barely even bats an eye about it. So that just goes to show you what kind of person he is. And so when Adam Warlock sees that, he's just like, yeah, no, I think I'm done with this guy, and and then that's kind of when he kind of starts to change his idea and kind of team up with the Guardians a little bit. Some other character growth that I really enjoyed. So GAMORA is really weird in this movie. She does this whole thing where like she doesn't like the Guardians that much, but throughout the movie like she enjoys them and like is actually kind of friends with them, but she's never gonna be Peter's love interest. And they set her down this path of like she's part of the Ravagers, And so it's almost like she still gets the happy ending and like gets free from like Thanos' grip, even though he's not, you know, alive in this universe. But she like frees herself to be her own person, but not in the way that we originally saw in like Guardians 1 and 2. This is more like just a different version of her, but she's still happy in the end, and she still like becomes like that good person in the end. And I thought that was a really neat way to play out her character in this movie. Nebula has a great role in that, like, she kind of is like the glue for the Guardians, which is weird because in Guardians 1 and even kind of in 2, she was just kind of like trying to kill them, especially Gamora. And by now she's like, you know, obviously she was left in the dust. I mean, not left in the dust, she was left behind in Infinity War and Endgame, and you know, she kind of just had all that time to really think, you know, hey, I really love these guys, and you know, I really miss my sister, and all these things, and she just becomes like this solid foundation for the Guardians. Not to mention, she's actually pretty sick with all the weapons, and like I think at one part she even like her neck breaks and she just adjusts it back into place, which was really neat. But I really enjoyed Nebula's character, especially with how far she's come in the MCU, because, you know, I can remember a point when she absolutely hated everyone and was just full of rage. The next one I do want to talk about is Groot. Obviously, you know, it's Groot. He doesn't have a lot of lines, but he actually says something other than I am Groot in this movie, and he says, "I love you guys." And that was really weird to hear. I was not expecting them to do that, especially just, I don't know, with the way they did it. It just didn't seem like it was gonna happen. But it was really cool that the way that they did it. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. And I think that's really all I have to say about Groot, aside from the fact that, like, he was just, you know, he's just being Groot, and that's really all there is to say about him. Yeah, I love Groot. The next one I want to talk about is Mantis, because she really steps up in this movie as like the protector of this well, I'll say family, because they pretty much are a family at this point. And there's this moment in the movie that I distinctively remember where she like defends Drax in front of Nebula and tells Nebula, like, why are you always so hard on everyone? Not everyone's perfect like you. And at least Drax, you know, he's the most, like, he's the one that doesn't hate himself on this team. And I really liked that little thing that she did for Drax. And I think even in that moment she was like calling him stupid, but that he's like the most loving character on the team. And I just found that really sweet. And I thought that was really good character development for Mantis, as well as when at the end, when she decides to go on her own, like, endeavors, you know, to finally see what she wants out of life. Moving on to Drax, he has a really, really good character moment in this movie where all the children in the high evolutionary ship are really afraid, and he like calms them down, and it becomes this really like sentimental thing of like when he had a daughter and this is what he used to do. And I think there's even a line where they say that he, you know, he was never supposed to be Drax the Destroyer, and Drax the dad. Like, he's a father, and that's who he is. And that really, like, touched, it was very touching, because, like, in all the movies, we've seen him just as this guy with, you know, blades out, guns of glory kind of guy who just goes for the action. But we never, you know, really considered that he is very caring to a lot of these Guardians and cares about who they are and, like, their well-being. And we really get to see that side of him, especially with children. Like, he sees Mantis as, like, you know, like a sister or like a daughter. And I just thought that was a really touching part of the movie. The next character I want to talk about is Star-Lord, because he kind of starts out this movie, and we kind of saw this in the holiday special, where he's like this drunk, saddened, basically like a drunk, sad dad that is upset because he lost the love of his life, and he actually has her in the world, but she doesn't even really care about him, or like, she's not even like the same person. And throughout the movie, he kind of like keeps looking for this outlet of like, you know, like, I was wronged. And Mantis has this really, really good like heart-to-heart with him, like, hey, like maybe you left someone too. And it becomes this like thing of like him reconnecting with, he actually, you know, goes back to Earth at the end of the movie and meets with his grandpa. And it's just really sweet because all this time Star-Lord's been avoiding going back there and saying hi to his granddad or his grandfather, you know, the one who was there when his mom died. And it's just really sweet. It's very sweet. And I thought it was a really good way to close out the movie. Obviously, there is like a little thing that says Star-Lord will return. It's actually one of the post-credit scenes, and it's just him eating cereal. So I thought that was pretty funny. Moving on to someone other than the Guardians, I will get to Rocket last, because I do want to talk about him last. Let's talk about the High Evolutionary, because he is a jerk. The scenes where he's torturing Rocket are just like so upsetting to watch. You know, he has these mind control powers like on his head where he could just throw everyone around, and he kind of does that to Rocket. And the things that he does to the other animals like Teefs and Floor and Lila is just really sad. Like those parts of the movies got really dark. And again, I don't think I've ever seen an MCU movie get as dark as those moments did. Like with just how they were treated and the way that Rocket was, just his look. You could tell that, you know, he was just innocent. And then, you know, the High Evolutionary has like an obsession with Rocket, with how smart he is and what, you know, how he's able to think and do things. It's really sad. It's really sad because Rocket just wants to be him. And, you know, he gets trapped in, you know, by the High Evolutionary. And then even when he tries to escape after finding out that they're not going to the New World, High Evolutionary kills Lila and he kills the rest of them. It's very well done. It's fantastic. It blew my mind like how well it was done. And I'm so glad that they took the time to really lean into that part of the movie. As far as the High Evolutionary goes, he's just a jerk. He does not care. I think, yeah, even in the movie, he literally, his whole planet that he made, Counter Earth, he just blows up because, quote unquote, there's a next stage of like evolution, or like there's better. So instead of, you know, he just lets them all die. So yeah, that was fun, you know, just kill everyone that's on your planet. And then he's holding all these kids captive and all these animals hostage, and he kills his whole crew that's been by his side the whole time. So it just goes to show that he doesn't really care about anyone, except just himself and the way he looks to other people, because Rocket made him look kind of dumb. So that's just the High Evolutionary for you. The fighting scenes were really good in this movie as well, because, well, the one that I do really want to specifically talk about is when they play No Sleep Till Brooklyn, and they go into the hallway and fight, like going to the High Evolutionary's like ship, and there's this whole thing, like this really cool, like just all these different shots in a hallway of the Guardians fighting the High Evolutionary's army. And there's just one shot specifically where Rocket like jumps in the air and he has his gun pointed down and he's like, ha ha ha! And I loved those moments. I was like, so, like, I had a smile across my face the whole time that was happening. And I really cannot wait to see this movie again. And yes, I will be going to see it again. Just because I want to. Just because I had so much fun watching this movie. But yes, the fight scenes were just absolutely fantastic. One of the final things I do want to talk about is the comedy, because it's actually really good in this movie. A lot of times, especially with most recent MCU projects, the comedy, they make attempts at comedy, but they're not very good. They're not very funny. It feels like I'm forced to laugh at them. This genuinely had me laughing. I think like I was actually like, there were moments where I was like actually laughing in the theater. And I just, and the way that they did the comedy a lot just felt very natural and it very flow. If it didn't feel forced, it didn't feel like they were setting up something. It was just very fun. There was one, I will say, there was one joke in the movie that like wasn't as funny to me. That was the whole Cosmo bad dog thing. It was funny, but it wasn't like as funny as a lot of the other jokes. But the rest of the comedy really lands for me, especially Will Poulter's Adam Warlock. I thought he was pretty funny as well. But that's where the comedy stands in this movie. Finally, the one mixed part of this movie that I do have, and the reason it's so mixed is because I really would have loved to see more of Rocket in this movie. And what I mean, I don't mean the flashbacks. I mean more of just him with the Guardians the whole movie, because obviously he's like on a table for like the first 2 acts because he gets hit by Adam Warlock and like can't be healed. And they kind of substitute him in the movie for like all these flashbacks with him, and I am okay with that. I loved all the flashbacks. I just wish we could have gotten to see him in action the whole movie, because him in action in the final act, and that's why I'm mixed on it, because we don't see him in action like mostly in the first 2 acts. It really is like so satisfying and gives me so much joy when we see him in that final like hour of the movie and he's just kicking butt. So overall, I really enjoyed this movie. I highly recommend that you go to see it in theaters because it deserves to be seen in theaters. It's the last Guardians movie, and the way that it's just done on screen, it deserves to be seen in theaters. It deserves to make the money of a movie, you know, that has a lot of fans behind it and has lots of love behind it, and it just closes out the Guardians trilogy again, like I've said, in a way that I could not have even imagined. And so for that reason, it's really worked its way up my list on my MCU ranking, which I will be trying to update as soon as I can for you guys. But with that said, guys, I will see you all in the next video, and until later, guys, peace.